my dungeon.
Welcome to Cauldron Script. I'm your host, Master Cauldron. If you're new to the show, I use my 24 years of BDSM experience and 20 years working in the psychology field to dispel myths, get rid of stereotypes, and answer your questions about BDSM. You can call in at 865-268-4005 to leave your questions or visit the crypt at cauldronscript.com. On this episode of the Crypt, I'm going to hit those rules to love by, and then Master Gabriel and I are going to talk about the dark side of dominance. That's right. Master Gabriel is back. You guys know him. You love him. You've given me lots of comments about his interview. So here we go. Rules to love by. Rule number 1, safe, sane, consensual, and informed. Rule number 2, kinky. That's KNKI and comes from the Kinky app, available on all platforms. Not a sponsor, but it does stand for knowledge, no intolerance, kindness, and integrity. And rule number 3, the quote from Mr. Paul Young: submission is not about authority, and it's not about obedience. It is all about relationships of love and respect. All right, Master Gabriel, welcome back to the Crypt.
Love to bother you as much as I possibly can.
And that is no joke, as you've heard stories about him walking by just to make faces while I'm trying to do interviews at DomCon.
I'm just making sure that, you're at your tip-top shape of your game there, proving your mettle.
Yeah, proving my mettle. Well, you have done that today with this email that you sent me that, talk about that a little bit. Just the email, what sparked it and what brought up this dark side of dominance?
Well, as most of your cryptors know, you've been doing these little after show tidbits, kind of, as you put it, pulling back the curtain. And it occurred to me that I have other mentorships that I deal with. I have other dominants that I talk to. It occurs that a lot of people, even dominants themselves, don't really see kind of the negative side of things, or not even just the negative, but the dark side of things. And there's kind of two splits to that. There's the part that others don't see and the things that we don't necessarily see in ourselves. And it's not always a bad thing, but certainly things that we want to make sure that we're aware of.
Yeah, I know with this list that you come up with, I can see myself in all of these at some point. And I think if we're being honest with ourselves, most people could say that. So let's go ahead and jump into this list. I've got them. Wow, this kind of reminds me of the Fun Size days where everything is listed out. But Imposter Syndrome. Now, I know personally for me that's been a big issue when it comes to the show, but I think I skipped the Imposter Syndrome as far as dominance goes, or being a dominant, because I started as a switch.
I mean, it's possible. And this list is certainly by no means only dominance. There's going to be several that also tie in with submission or slavehood or switchiness. But coming from a dominant perspective, mm-hmm. I don't think a whole lot of people hear that often. So that's kind of why I skewed that direction with it. But yeah, imposter syndrome is a big one. I deal with that quite often. I've dealt with it myself. When I first got my master's cover, I dealt with it personally. There's been several times throughout my, career in kink that, certain things happen, whether, things went awry with a submissive or things didn't go as planned in a scene and it pops up. And for those who don't know what imposter syndrome is, let's explain that. Imposter syndrome is where you feel like you're an imposter, where you're kind of, you're playing the role, but, what if people knew that you didn't really know as much as they think you know, or, you're not as dominant as they think you are. It's much less about what you actually are and what you can actually do. And it kind of is almost like it starts to make you doubt yourself, make you doubt your talents, make you doubt what you know. So it's not always necessarily that you don't know these things. It oftentimes is that you don't know, mm-hmm.
Thinking back on it, it seems like one of the times that imposter syndrome really hits is after a public scene goes bad or the ending of a dynamic. Have you experienced that yourself?
Yeah, especially in my earlier years for that. Something goes awry, it goes sideways in a scene. And you kind of start to go in this downward spiral of, well, maybe I'm not as good as I think that I am. Maybe I don't know what I think I know. What exactly did I do wrong? How can I fix it? And you'll even see almost a depressive state kind of take on, in that, you feel bad for what happened. You start to kind of withdraw a little bit. Sometimes dominants will even withdraw away from their subs a little bit because they feel that they're the only person to blame for that having gone on, because you're the dominant, so you're supposed to be in charge. You're supposed to be driving the car on this, and things aren't always that cut and dry. It's good to kind of take a deep dive and look into yourself and see what you could have done better. But when imposter syndrome comes in, that kind of spirals down into more of a depressive state. It kind of makes you feel like everything that you've done is wrong, or that you don't know anything at that point. It's really easy to get into that spiral.
I see it as self-doubt on some serious steroids.
Exactly.
Because it will dump you. I know, because I'm going to correct myself here or contradict myself. When this first started being talked about, I said, because I was a switch, starting out, I avoided imposter syndrome. But then in asking about whether or not you have experienced it personally with a scene that's gone bad or the ending of a dynamic, I asked that out of my own personal experience. So it's something that I would almost say that it's inevitable that you experience it at some point if you're in this for any amount of time.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not just with scenes going sideways. I've taught several classes, and probably half of them I went into the class with the back of my head going, well, what if they see through me? What if they, see that I don't necessarily know everything that I'm talking about? And I know what my talking points are. I know that I've gone through them. I know that what I'm discussing is the most accurate information that I have at that time. So there's no reason for me to be really thinking that, but it's just that self-doubt that comes in the back. Now, I mentioned, when I got my master's cover, that there was some self-doubt in there also. There was serious imposter syndrome, just the feeling of, did I actually earn this? Am I really at this level at this point? But to be fair, that also gave me something when I covered Master Gear, gave me a talking point for him. Our first discussion within 24 hours of him getting his cover is, look, you're going to feel this way. You're going to feel that you didn't earn this, that you didn't get to that level. That alone shows me that you're ready for it, because you're not full of yourself and thinking that, you've been at this level for a long time. But also, that kind of calls into question my judgment at that point, so if you get to that point where you're feeling like you didn't earn it, consider that, somebody on the outside felt that you did. So whether you feel that you're at that level or not is irrelevant at this point. Make sure that you're acting the part. Make sure that you're moving forward and that you're actually doing something to have earned that from here on out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So how is it that you have dealt with it in the past when this has come up?
Honestly, in the early years when I didn't necessarily know what was going on, it was a couple days to a week of just kind of sticking to myself, which probably was not the best thing to do. You'll find that talking with others and it's really hard to listen to others and really hard to listen. People are going to tell you that you do know what you're doing. People are going to tell you that you do know all of these things and whatnot. But when you're kind of in that imposter syndrome loop, it's really hard to listen. Yeah. I really got to treat it like a depressive state.
And that's what I was about to say when you brought up the isolation, really, when you're sticking off to yourself and you're ignoring it. Imposter syndrome is very much a form of depression. And like any depression, you need people around, and you don't need a bunch of yes people, but real friends, real family that are going to support you and recognize what it is and help you out with it. That's one of the biggest traps being Mr. Domly Dom or Lady Domly Dome, and thinking that, well, because we wear this self-branded title of dominant, that we're bulletproof, and it's such crap. I mean, you know me personally, I've got my issues.
Yeah, I think the best way that was ever explained to me was in a manner of sword making. That swords, the harder the steel of a sword, the easier it is to actually just crack that sword. It's the swords that flex and the swords that aren't exactly 100% hardened, that have some flex to them, that survive battle.
Mm-hmm. And that's
so
that's through that tempering.
Kind of like that. You can't be too hard. You can't be too rigid. Otherwise, you're easy to crack if you're too rigid. Yeah. You got to flex.
Yeah, that tempering process that you use on steel. I know. I was just watching something, The King of Random on YouTube, where they took some steel and they were checking to see how easy it was to break it or bend it, and what really was a process for making it actually durable steel. And the tempering process, I've heard that all my life. This knife was, tempered steel, tempered rolled steel, whatever. And all they did was bake it on 450 for like 2 hours. And they had two pieces. One of them, they had just, got red hot and quenched it in the oil. And then the other one, after they quenched it, they threw it in the oven to temper it for a couple hours. And the one, just like you're saying, that it was so strong, it just broke. They swung a 75-pound weight against it from about 6 inches away, and it just shattered. And the other one sprung back, and it's through that tempering of life. If we recognize it and we allow ourselves to be in the oven and cook just a little bit longer and endure ourselves, basically, because to me, we're putting all this pressure on ourselves. We decide to put the weight of the world on our shoulders. And if we'll just take a bit to endure that and recognize what it is, then we will come out the other side so much stronger. And hopefully in that strength is also, or what makes that strength is wisdom. And so we will recognize when these things come up, all these things that we're going to talk about, and we'll be able to defeat them and grow from them a lot quicker. So any last thoughts?
Realistically, we're the dominants. We're the ones that are saying what we're going to do and when we're going to do it. And that includes saying, I'm going to be human for 30 minutes.
Yeah.
I'm going to step away for just 30 minutes to kind of clear my head. Now, back to the imposter syndrome, in my time that I've been in this, the best way that I've found to kind of get through it quicker is a 10-minute rule. So when you start feeling yourself in that spiral, you're taking 10 minutes to do something, anything that has nothing to do with what you're spiraling about, just something to break that chain. Mm-hmm. And then as soon as you're done with that 10 minutes, if you have friends and family nearby or submissives or whomever nearby, get back into the sync of things with that. It might take a time or two. It's not always just a one and done kind of thing, but 10-minute rule works. It's not too awful long. It doesn't feel tedious. It's not, oh my God, things are going to go to on a handbasket if I step away for 10 minutes. 10 minutes to do something, even if it's that, you're going to sit there and eat ice cream and not think about all of this stuff, Go mow a lawn. I don't know. Do something other than just something to keep yourself from thinking about this. And those thoughts are going to pop in your head during that time. But during that 10-minute time, you're giving yourself permission to, it popped in my head. We're going to wait until 10 minutes to think about this. Mm-hmm. We're just going to hold off. Nothing's going to explode if I don't think about this for 10 minutes.
I like that. I think that's where my cell phone comes into play quite often. One of those, dumb little games, kind of just, okay, jump away. I'm going to do this for a minute. And that will usually break me into something else. Cause within a couple of minutes, I'm like, oh my God, this is childish and stupid. I don't need to be doing this. I want to find something productive, but it acts as a springboard to move my mind from where it was to where it needs to be so that it can go back to where it was, but in a better state of mind. So yeah, I love it. I love it. I've never actually thought of it being an actual, well, that's a whole lot of actuals, 10-minute rule, but yeah. All right, let's move on into always having to be on. That's a problem for me because I think that's probably what causes me the most stress. Always is that feeling of having to be on. But you wrote this, so what are your thoughts on that? What brought that up?
So you're going to lob it in my lap. Got it.
I am.
So with this particular topic, I mean, primarily, I think we're talking about lifestylers on this topic. But that's not to say that it couldn't happen with somebody who's not a 24/7 lifestyler. So you're going to have to kind of take it in with, what your lifestyle is and what your dynamic is and whether it applies to you or not. But just that feeling of always having to be the dominant, always having to make the decisions, always having to, having to, it's always on your shoulders. I mean, realistically, this is what we signed up for. We signed up for making the decisions, but that does not mean that we can't bring in outside information. And this is something that takes a little bit of communication, because at first, even with Star, my slave, when we first started doing more dynamic, it was a little more difficult for her to wrap her head around the fact that I'm not asking for her to make a decision. I'm asking for outside information, because I am 100% Leo when it comes to making decisions. And I don't care which 5 restaurants we're picking. I really could find something at any restaurant that I can find. Oh, there's a whip right there for you.
Yep.
There's so much that I'm really just okay with. We went on a family vacation to Chicago, and we're trying to figure out things for that. And I understand where she was coming from, that she felt that she was trying to find all the information for it. And really, the way that I work is, look, I've never been to this place. I don't know what we're going for. We're going to wander around some blocks and we're going to find some stuff. Mm-hmm. That's vacation. It's just, I'm really open to new and interesting experiences that we didn't necessarily plan for.
What, you mean no itinerary?
Well, I mean, it ends up kind of a 50-50 because, we find stuff and we kind of fit things in and, we wander along our way. Mm-hmm. But, so when it comes to decision making with Master Gear had this trouble early on with him and his slave, is that he would she felt that he would defer all the decisions to her. Now, fine, if you really wanted to break it down, I'm the dom, I do what I want. That includes making you do the decisions. Mm-hmm. And it kind of detracts, I guess, from the dynamic, doing that a little too much. Once in a while, fine. Mm-hmm. But one thing that kind of helped them out in order to get back on track was, all right, Gear, you can ask for 3 options from her. She's not making a decision. She's giving you information. If you need information, fine, that's information. But an overload of information is too much. 1 or 2 might be too little. So max, you get 3 options from her at a time. And at that point, you got to make a decision. So, but yeah, just that's just one part of feeling like you're always on. Like you always have to be on guard for disciplining or punishing or, keeping the dynamic on track. Now, part of this is on the S side of the slash. Okay. If I'm constantly really having to keep track of your, another one for you. I'm just going to rack up all those whip cracks for you. If I'm constantly having to keep track of you and make sure that you're getting your life on track, I mean, that might warrant a discussion. Now, I might be, a daddy dom, and that might be my thing. Mm-hmm. Personally, it's not, but if that's your thing, if that's, you're really wanting to do that as a dynamic, then that works for you. For me personally, not so much. I've got other things that I want to be able to do. I have, a 14-year-old myself. I don't need another child in my life. I've got one. I don't need somebody to look after and somebody to make sure that they're doing everything that they're supposed to be doing. So someone like Star fits very well for me because she's intelligent. Not that submissives aren't, but in my specific scenario, she's an intelligent woman who's got her life together. She's got a great job. I don't really have to keep track of her life details in order to keep things moving forward. She's very on point with me as to what we want in our dynamic. Oftentimes, even when I'm just kind of slacking, she'll remind me. And she's very good at being able to communicate. Now, that's not, we've had our fair share of arguments and whatnot, but it's always come around to how do we do this differently next time? Because neither one of us really want to get into an argument. That's not our jam. So how can she approach me next time? So that way it doesn't come off as a demand or something and I get, uppity,
Yeah.
So a lot of this comes down to really communication within the dynamic. If things aren't quite what you want in that dynamic, you might need to rediscuss the needs and wants or the hard and soft limits. And things like that are going to be flexible over your dynamic time. But if things aren't working the way that you want them to, if you're always having to feel like you're chasing somebody and always having to be on and always having to make sure that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing, for some of us, that might be great. And for some of us, not so much. So if you're feeling like it's too much, you got to be able to communicate that.
Mm-hmm. Now, you brought up several different things. Starting out with the example of picking what's for dinner.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was my Mayfair that you met. That's one of her big issues that drives her crazy is when, if it's like Saturday nights, that's our night. So food time. And I ask her, are you in the mood for anything? She absolutely hates that. It's like, I'm in this so I don't have to decide. Oh, make no mistake. You're not deciding. I'm just asking you if you're in the mood for anything for that information. But she always takes it as, me trying to, I guess, take a break because it's the weekend and I work so hard through the week. And just be lazy. The other thing, something that you didn't get into that I know you may have an issue with this. I certainly do because you're a very public figure within your community. I wouldn't say I'm as public, but for a certain sect of my community, I'm very public. And that is when you and your slave, walk into Sanctuary or to any event, I'm sure that people are trying to pull you or both of you in different directions for different things. And for me with Mayfair, that can be a big issue. And that is, when I'm prepping for an event, whether it's just like, I found out there's a dungeon party tonight that I didn't know was happening until right before you and I got on Skype. I mean, literally just found out about it. So that automatically gets my mind even more jacked up into being, on. And, so as far as that public persona, which also gets into another thing that we're going to talk about here, is public persona versus private reality, pretty much. How do you deal with that?
I've been fortunate enough that we're pretty close to the same, regardless of whether we're somewhere or not. Now, a lot of the events that we run, we don't necessarily play at, mainly because I'm on, event runner mode.
Would you consider her an extrovert as well? No,
not really. No.
Okay.
She can play the part, but she'd rather not.
Okay.
But we both enjoy kind of teaching, imparting our wisdom, that kind of thing, even learning from other people. So we do enjoy chatting with people, and we certainly have our times that we do that. But like last weekend, we went out for Master Gear's bachelor party. And he wanted it co-ed, so both of us were there. We thought it was great because with all the other events and such that we're doing, we don't get out to a dungeon to play that often. So it was a prime opportunity to go out and play. And on occasion we'll have some people chat with us and talk with us, but it's been a long uphill battle to learn to, I guess, compartmentalize is the better way to put that. Master Gabriel, what do you think of so and so? I tell you what, I'm about to go play in a scene. I will be out on the smoking patio doing a cigar. After that, probably about an hour or so. I would love to chat with you about this. And if I miss you, you can catch up with me on FetLife, and I'll be happy to, give you a call, talk to you, meet up in person, whatever. But being able to differentiate, we're here to play versus we're here to talk and do other things.
Setting boundaries.
Yeah. And it's really easy for dominants, I think, to kind of get sucked into that because you want to be, known as that person. It's kind of that personality of, I kind of want to be the one that's showing everybody all the things, but not everybody listens. So there's that. But more so, there's just, I learned the hard way that that's a really good way to give all of my time to everyone else.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's been the last couple of years slowly kind of scaling that back and finding a better balance. So that's something that I had to learn along the way. And I've been in the scene, properly actually out in the scene for about 14 years now. So it's only the last 2 or 3 years that I've, slowly been trying to scale that back, and emphasis on the word slowly.
Some lessons we learn a little quicker than others.
Yeah.
So that's a hard one for me that I'm still working on. I know the proper thing to do, or what I consider would be the proper thing to do. I just have a really, really difficult time implementing that. So, yeah.
I like to think of it as knowledge about kink is my kink.
Mm-hmm.
Because I love to talk about it. I love to explain it. I love to talk about the psychology of things a bit, the connections between other worlds that we can utilize in kink and in being a dominant.
Mm-hmm.
Love talking about it, but there's only so much time to go around.
Yeah.
So, until I get that time machine working, I'm stuck with this.
I think one of my kinks, one of my things in being a dominant, is actually what I consider a leather trait, which is being in service to the community itself and helping others. That's why I loved working in the medical field and all the years in the psych field, is just that helping others. But the dominant side of that is the being in charge of it, of when I do it, how I do it, maintaining that education level so that I can do it and on my terms. And a lot of people just don't understand that concept at all of service, that we should all be servants to the community and to those in need. It's an attitude of, well, screw them. Yeah, that's their own issue. They were dumb enough to do what they did. They can figure out how to get out of it. Sure, in some cases, but and it sounds like a tangent. And this is actually not one of my typical tangents, because that actually adds to a lot of the stress of me feeling that I always have to be on, especially with some of the things going on right now locally and with trying to open up a play space here in Knoxville. So, yeah. Any final thoughts on that one?
Well, like you said, with the community service, now I didn't grow up in the scene in leather. My community service background spawns from Boy Scouts, particularly. And, it's kind of carried with me through the years. So, we've always tried to help with things, but there are certain times, there's been DomCons where there's not that many people helping break down, mm-hmm. or you have volunteers, But those volunteers, after they've been able to go to DomCon, suddenly vanish. The volunteers just aren't there at the end of it. But it's got to get done one way or another. So, that, like you said, that feeling of always being on, because if I don't do it, who the fuck is? Another whiplash for you. Like I said, if I don't do it, nobody else is going to do it. So trying to teach others in order to be able to do that. Now, what we've done, and as you probably saw when we broke down DomCon this last time, because you and your house graciously helped us with that. But there are certain things that we have set up. We have certain calls. We use rally as a verbal call for anybody who's not doing anything currently right this moment. Get over here. We need hands. Mm-hmm. We've got a taunt, which is our normal for our household. That's, whether you're doing something or not, get over here. Drop it. Get over here. We do what's called a fire line, which is essentially just a big assembly line. We all line up. We each pass in. That way, no one person is carrying anything too ungodly heavy. We pass it down the line and we get it in quickly. And we've built things in order to make it quick and easy for us to do. But at the same time, we also start ahead. We start looking for extra helpers, because we know that in particular with certain events that there's a lack of helpers at the tail end of it. And trying to impress upon people that, look, this thing doesn't magically sprout on its own. Mm-hmm. And it sure as hell isn't going to magically go in the truck on its own. While everybody else is on that final last party, there's a dozen or two of us that are breaking this thing down. And the more hands we have, the faster that goes, and we can all get to the party.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But instead it's a few hands and no party at all.
Right. Now, you can kind of take this as a different way of thinking about it, though. As a dominant, if I have 2 submissives, if I have 1 submissive, if I have 3 submissives, however many, if I've got a spare pair of hands that I can offer, if every single dominant that was at that after party offered up 1 person, that'd be a huge amount of hands.
No, it would have taken 30 minutes to break it down.
Yeah. Yeah, it wouldn't have been anything at all.
Especially since if they all follow the lead by example, so you get 1 dominant and 1 submissive. So
yeah.
Don't just send them, come help too.
Yeah, exactly. Come on and come help. Even if it's not every single time, nobody's asking us as dominants to do community service all the time.
No.
Most of us that are there are doing it of our own accord. Mm-hmm. So if you did it of your own accord once or twice a year, that's a big help.
Yeah. And it's like you said, I get mine from Boy Scouts. I grew up in the Scouts as well. So I had a scouting family from way back. But it's always, that's just instilled in me. It's you leave the area better off than you found it. That was what I was taught when we would go camping. You always take time to go around with a trash bag and pick up trash that is in that campsite that somebody else has left. And, and I know that to some people that might be, you're just a goody trying to brag on yourself. No, I'm just giving my experience based on my experience.
Well, and maybe my view is slightly askewed because Mr. Cyan is my mentor, so, and we've been friends for as long as I've been in the scene. So I do care for her. I know, and I understand what the behind the scenes looks like on an event. Mm-hmm. When you leave an event as a person attending, whether you drop a piece of trash on the ground or not is really neither here nor there. It's your own feelings at that point in time, right?
Right.
For an event, if you leave stuff on the ground after you're done breaking down, well, the venue typically will charge an extra couple $100 just for cleanup, even if there's just 1 crumb on the floor. So that's another couple $100 that are coming out of the event itself. Mm-hmm. Now, who runs DomCon? Cyan and the board. So who does that come from? Cyan and the board.
Yeah.
It's all handled somewhere.
And people think that because of the price of tickets and things like that, any possible merch sales or the rental of the merchandise booths themselves, that these events bring in a lot of money. And what people don't realize is just exactly how much these events cost. They don't make much. I'm running the numbers on my opening the club here, and because of the size that it's going to have to be, because that's all that's available. It's not even the size. It's too much space for what I actually need, but it's all that I'm going to be able to find. It's going to break down to me making about $600 a month with my projected participation. And is that worth it? No, it's really not worth it, because it's a lot of time, a lot of trouble. Am I going to do it anyway? Yeah, because the community needs it. And I'm fairly certain that other people are going to step in and help. And then if they're not, then after my year or 2 year lease is up, then we won't have a space anymore. But we will see. It's worth it to me to try to make sure that happens, because the community needs a central location, a home base.
Yeah.
The only communities I've seen that really thrive and grow have these things. The smaller ones, they tend to struggle quite a bit. And it gives a chance when you don't have that central community center. It gives a chance or the opportunity more for a lot more abuse to take place with people hiding in the shadows. And but anyway, I have kind of jumped off on a tangent here a little bit. So let's blustery behavior. This one, when I first read the email, I was like, blustery behavior. There are so many things that could get into. That in itself could be one individual episode that could be like a comedy podcast, really, talking about things that we've seen. But what threw that one into the mix of things to watch out for, the dark side?
There's a couple different ways that you could look at it, like you said. So there's one, and wait for it, there's another whip crack coming. There's one where you're just a complete jackass of a dominant, and you walk in expecting everyone to kneel at your feet and generally act like a jerk.
Mm-hmm.
That's the short version of that one. But even those of us who like to think that we're good dominants can easily fall into something like this. I mean, really, you're talking about pack behavior. You get around other dominants, you get around other people, you start feeling a little more of yourself, I guess. And sometimes that can lead to doing behaviors that you normally wouldn't do, forgetting behaviors that you normally should do, like negotiations and check-ins and those kind of things. So it's really just kind of getting into a dungeon with a lot of people and kind of losing yourself a little bit. You're showing off is essentially what you're doing. So really kind of keeping track on what you should be doing and kind of making sure that you're doing your part is very important.
Yeah. If you're on a stage or been called to perform a scene, then this behavior is expected during that scene. You're up there, you're in front of people, you're showing them what you've got. But before you step up to do that, and after you're finished, take it back down. We get it. You're awesome. We know it. We've just witnessed it. Or maybe we haven't and you just think so. But regardless, take it down. I know when I was coming out to DomCon, a few people were like, oh my God, you're just going to get out there and rule the place, and small town, mentality when it come to that. And I'm like, yeah, this is in LA. First off, I don't want to. Second, I have no intentions of that. And third, it's not going to happen. I'm a little fish in a really, really big sea out there, even if that was my intention. And then, you asked me about doing a performance there in the vendor stage, and I'm super proud of Mayfair, but her nerve just for trying. We knew it was going to be an issue. Well, she knew it was going to be an issue. I thought that she would conquer it, which she did, because she lasted. She got up there. She did it. She She was in front of people on a stage, and I was so proud of her. I can't say that enough. I am so incredibly proud of the 9 minutes that she spent on that stage. But the mentality of a lot of people around, because they love watching me play so much, was that I should just have this attitude that I was going to LA to show you guys out there how it's done. And
gotcha. How'd that work out for you?
I don't know because that was not anywhere on my radar. That was not part of what I wanted to do, because that would have definitely been a blustery behavior that I have no care or concern in participating in. However, I do know other people, I saw them, I witnessed it, that did participate in some of that I'm too hot to trot kind of, wow, there's a kickback phrase from the 80s that just really, and it wasn't just there, it's any convention, anything that any event, no matter how small it is, locally or otherwise, there's always at least that one person that overdoes it, whether it is a dom, and people, don't get it twisted. It could be a submissive, a very arrogant, proud, submissive, but it doesn't take arrogance. It just takes a moment of really sipping your own Kool-Aid, I think.
Yeah.
I was expecting, and this is one thing that I will say with DomCon, I was expecting more of this out of the ladies, the lady doms, and a lot of that bitchiness and toward everybody. And it wasn't. Everybody was so pleasant. I mean, there was some that were definitely in character walking around by that, because, you could tell they have their pro side that is very much a character. That's their job that they play. And then, some of them that sat down and talked with me that I've already published interviews where as soon as they sit down and they talk one-on-one and they get really personal and all that goes away, and it's so beautiful, and it's, and in some cases so incredibly intense, but always it was very intimate. And to see that the pompous arrogance not really be there was a surprise, to be honest, in being out there. So, yeah, but more examples. What can you give, say, the worst case of this that you've ever seen? Not to call anybody out by name or anything like that, but
oh yeah, I've got an example or two.
I knew you would.
Well, I mean, before we go too far into it, Cryptors, I just want to make sure that we're going to cross here, because we kind of skewed over to being on stage. This is not just a being on stage thing. This is also just general scenes, or even just walking around, just a change in attitude, because the moment you step into a dungeon, your mindset differs than what you are doing day to day, or at least for the most of us, it does.
Yeah.
So there's some change, some little change. For some people, it's more than others. But to your example, I think the worst one that I ever heard, or seen rather, was the dominant, relatively new dom. So they did their negotiations. They did everything they were supposed to do. They had a nice new paddle that had spikes on it. It was really cool. It had spikes on the back of it. And somewhere along the middle of the scene, because there were other dominants, nobody even mentioned using the spiky side of the paddle. It was just because there was others there, and this dominant got caught up in showing off for these other dominants that were nearby. They flipped the paddle and used the spiky side and ended up with more injury than was supposed to happen.
Yeah,
and that really, nobody goaded them into it. Nobody said, hey, you should do this. It was simply a matter of, getting caught up in the herd and trying to show off for the people that you felt were bigger fish than you were.
Yeah. Well, we're going to get into herd mentality. But I think for me, some of the biggest cases of this that I've ever seen is when we buy into, especially in a master slave setting or property, owner property settings, getting that TPE, that total power exchange, where it's 100% control, and forgetting that, yeah, it may be within that relationship, but that is also negotiated control. And regardless, we are people, and that slave or that property is a person. And no matter what they've said in the relationship, they can divorce you. They can end that relationship. And, but people getting so caught up in that it turns abusive, and that they don't even realize it. They don't think that it's not their intention to abuse somebody. And in one particular case that I'm thinking of specifically, I absolutely believe he never had any intention of abusing this person. It's just that constant increase in his personal popularity, and the devotion that he was receiving, and it really changed who he was quicker than what he or anyone else could recognize. And it just caused him to start taking things too far and become too full of himself, and nobody put him in check and said, hey, you know what? I love you, man, but you're way too into your own juice, and it's time to step back and remember we are people, and this slave of yours is a person, and maybe you need to consider what is inevitably to come, because ultimately one thing can lead to another. And I'm not, of course, I'm not saying that is always the case. That's probably the absolute worst case scenario, other than it getting to a point where somebody dies. But it's just so unflattering when somebody is so arrogant too. And when you work so hard to get the skills, and when I say get, it's because we have to obtain them. We have to search for that information. We have to look for those classes and then attend and then do the work and study and learn ourselves. So we're getting this knowledge and these skills. And then to allow that to affect our ego, and then to throw that out into the community or into our personal relationships, it destroys our own credibility. So I think it's something that we really need to focus on in doing that as we learn and grow. And since this is a 101 podcast, all of these things certainly apply from the beginning to the end of our lives. And doing this. So,
and funny enough, a lot of this isn't just, we just happen to have a better focus on this in kink because, it's in a smaller realm.
Yeah.
So these are things that happen day to day. We just need to be able to handle them in kink.
Yeah.
Now, kind of circling around to how to help against this. I usually would teach mentees and other people, a credo is actually a really good way to help against this. My household has a credo, but if you even have a personal credo, even 3 words that kind of sum up what it is, who it is that you want to be, and how it is that you want to act. For us, it's to love, to honor, to respect. For others, it might be something else. I believe yours is honor above all else.
Respect above all else.
I'm sorry, respect above all else. Something to kind of give you some guidance, because let's say you walk into a dungeon and your credo is respect above all else, and you're about to have an interaction with somebody in a scene, and you think mid-scene, hey, we didn't negotiate this particular toy, but I think I'm going to bring this out and let's do this mid-scene. And in your head, you got that little voice in there of respect above all else. Is this respectful to do? No. Therefore, it is called stupid. And rule number 1 is don't do stupid.
Yes, it is. Oh, that's a good example of real world application of how these things can come into play. All right. So what are your final thoughts on blustery behavior?
So there's a a quote that I see float around, and I can't for the life of me remember who exactly did it. It might have been Plato or somebody. I'm sure one of your cryptors will hear this and they'll give you a nice big message. But it's, is it true? Is it kind? Is it necessary? And that's in relation to, before you open your mouth and speak, is what you're about to say true? Is it a kind thing to say? And is it necessary to say it? Those should be kind of the three doorways before you say a thing. Now, of course, this is hard to apply to something like a scene, but it ties in with what we were just talking about having kind of like a mantra or a credo, something to kind of help guide your behavior. Because essentially, as dominants, we're given this whole ball of power. Mm-hmm. And, we're supposed to kind of do something with that. And it's really hard to find your own direction when you're essentially given a ball of chaos, and you're supposed to create some kind of order out of that. So, things like your needs and wants come into play with this kind of a thing. Mm-hmm. Your limits kind of come in with it. Because a lot of us as dominants don't even think about those things, at least early on when we're coming into it. A lot of new doms, when you're talking about needs and wants and limits and those kind of things, primarily it's submissives talking about those things. Mm-hmm. I literally was first asked for the first time what my needs and wants were with my slave star about 4 years ago. Nobody had ever asked me that before then.
Wow.
But yeah, it's certainly something that having some kind of guidance, 3 to 5 words. I suggest 3 only because it's easy to remember. It's easy for you to kind of turn it into almost like poetry. They don't have to rhyme, but it's got a cadence to it. So it's easy to remember and easy to keep with you.
Oh, I love the quote. I'll have to look that up. I've heard it before. Yeah, it's a popular quote, but I've never heard who said that originally. I cannot disagree with you at all in any point there. Everyone needs to have something to go back to. I'm a big fan of movies. I'm a cinephile. And the movie Inception, how they all carried their own totem.
Right.
And nobody else was allowed to touch it because if they did, then they would know exactly the weight and the true feel of it and all that. And that was the thing that would let them know whether they were dreaming or awake. And I think that to have some type of totem, whether it is a saying or something that will kind of bring you back. I have that in my necklace that I normally wear, that I will, after a scene, if I'm too deep, if it's been a really cathartic scene with a whole lot of energy exchange, then I need that to come back. So, and I think that that's very similar. So this next one I have seen cause a lot of damage, and I've seen it do just some scary things in the vanilla world. Herd mentality, showing off how big of a dummy pants you are while in a dungeon, or changing in behavior based on where you are and who you're with in a group format.
Right.
So why did you choose to throw this in there in the dark side of BDSM? Because this isn't something that most people will think of very quickly, even though it can be one of the bigger issues. That's where a lot of hazing comes from, and community abuse and picking on people will come from. So what sparked it for you?
As you know, I have a background in psychology as well. And just to kind of, as a sideline, to be clear, all of these things, every single thing that we're talking about here, yes, they can be on the dark side of things, but this doesn't mean that you're a bad person or a bad dominant. There are things that you just need to be aware of. And if you have engaged in these behaviors, knowing that, understanding that, and being able to do better from that is the whole goal.
And that's the thing, is it absolutely doesn't make you a bad person, because everybody that I know of in some way or another has participated in every one of these.
Right. And I'm sure somebody's going to pipe up with, doing this thing was a jackass thing and I was a bad person. Well, like if you keep doing it knowingly, sure, you're an asshole.
Yeah.
Another whip crack.
Yeah. 2 in a row right there.
That's what you get for smoking a cigar in front of me.
And it's a Cuban got him for me while she was in Japan.
Bite me. So understanding these things and working with them and kind of doing better from them, you did a bad thing. You're not a bad person. Now you are doing a bad thing by, trying to show off your Cuban cigar. But in all seriousness, I just want to make sure that all beings that this is a 101, especially that's understand.
Yeah.
Like you said, everybody that we know of has engaged in some of these behaviors at some point in time. I've done it myself, which
Right.
is why I want to make sure other people know about it.
Right.
Understanding it, you did a bad thing. You're not a bad person. Let's learn and do better.
Yeah.
So back to herd mentality. Herd mentality, like you kind of pointed out, is that getting around certain people and kind of being in a group, the herd mentality is kind of like your group thinking, or you're in a mentality where you're going to act in accordance with what you think the quote unquote rules of that group are.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if that means that you're around a group of actual jerk doms and you start acting like that because you don't want to be that person that's on the outside of that group, or if you find yourself, well, like you, Cauldron, being out in LA, and this isn't something you actually did, but it was a possibility. You were in a new place. People from your area kind of expected maybe that you would be coming out and showing us a thing or two. Even though you were away from your group, that herd mentality, that group think could still potentially be there, that you're doing things to impress your group, your circle.
Yeah.
That's not always the best thing. I mean, there are plenty of dominants out there who are just fucking up. Whiplash. And realistically, every time that we play, every time that anybody plays, there is likely somebody watching and seeing how you do it. So if you're the type of dominant that doesn't care that you're striking the back of the neck or the kidneys really hard, well, guess what newbies are going to learn from watching you do that?
Mm-hmm.
They're going to learn that that's an okay place, an okay thing to do.
Yeah.
So it's not always the best thing to go along with what the group is doing.
And for the record, that is not okay to do. Hit the kidneys.
Yeah. Hit the kidneys is bad. Kidneys bad.
Yeah, kidneys real bad. I get asked that all the time. What is the absolute worst place to hit somebody? And that's the kidneys. It's a very soft area and they bruise really easily.
Yeah. My favorite trick question is, what are the no strike zones? And people invariably, they always miss the last one of it, because a lot of people will talk about eyes. They'll talk about, kind of temples and ears and those kind of things, back of the neck. They'll talk about kidneys, and then they'll kind of stop there. And it's like, okay, well, what else is on there? What else is on that list? And people will give me the look that you're giving me right now is what the hell are you talking about?
Oh, no, I'm shaking my head. Like, seriously, people don't.
One of the biggest things that people miss is that a no strike zone is anywhere that has been negotiated as a place not to strike. Some people have scars. Some people have previous damage. Some people have psychological damage in certain areas.
Mm-hmm.
That striking certain things and doing certain activities triggers certain reactions or hurts. So, yeah, anywhere that you've negotiated is a no zone. I know that wasn't really on our topics list, but there you go.
No, it all applies. I mean, we can be all over the place. Cryptors are used to me being all over the place, especially as of late with my rants. All right. Herd mentality can be a bad thing. There are also positive times. We'll use DomCon as an example again. The herd that I was hanging out with, being House Ravenblood, was cleaning up after the event Sunday night. There was a party going on. None of my household made it to that party because we were in with the people that were doing some good and helping cleaning up the event and taking care of things. So it's not necessarily a bad thing, but be mindful of it, because we don't really want to just follow for the sake of following or getting into that. We're playing the popularity game or trying to be the cool kid in town, whatever. It's just, it's really a very quick path to getting in trouble, getting a bad name, doing something stupid, and needs a word of caution. So,
right. Exactly.
The next one. Now, this most certainly wouldn't apply to me ever. The halo effect, how your behavior as a dominant makes people think certain things of your charge, both good and bad, how your charge's behavior makes you look. And for those that don't follow some old school wording there, A person's charge would be their submissive or slave or property or their pet, any of those on the right side of the slash.
Or in my case, a household, anybody that's under my guidance.
Yeah. I was getting there, man. I was getting there. So that one.
Well, maybe let's define halo effect first. I mean, halo effect, a lot of people have never heard of. I know that you and I have because of our psych backgrounds, but the halo effect is the way that you are viewed by virtue of being around certain people.
Yeah.
So, like if you're an employee at ExxonMobil, you could be doing the best work in the world, but if there's oil spills and that kind of stuff and everything, you're probably viewed like dirt.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Enron, all the Enron employees, It was the top guys at Enron that were stealing everybody's money, and people underneath them were the ones that suffered. However, I saw something, it was back last year, I believe, and it was like a custodian or something like that saying that just in the fact that he had worked there, it had caused him to have a stigma associated with himself and his work, or his ethics rather.
Right.
Just because he had worked for a company where the people who ran it stole everybody's pension plans and bankrupted the company. We want to think that we're individuals. And to some extent, we are, in the fact that we have our own choices to make. However, when it comes to society, we are grouped with those that we surround ourselves with. And people have wanted to debate me over and over with this one for years, especially in the sociology background, because sociology and psychology, though we are related, we love to butt heads with each other because it's just fun. And we love to have those debates. And you know, there's that big debate as to whether or not you are the people that you surround yourself with. And the answer to that is yes. Look at the vetting process.
Yeah.
You know, that's certainly huge. I think it's bigger when it comes to, and I don't like using this term, but I will, a successful career within a community. It's even more so important there, and in who we surround ourselves with. So anyway, share your thoughts. You're the one that come up with this. So what were your thoughts when you first threw this one at the end of the list there?
Well, this is going to have a lot of different points again. So there's different ways that things can be viewed. Now there's the jerk dom, who then people view their submissives or charges as jerks as well. But there's also the other spectrum of it. Just because you're being viewed in the same light or in a light with your connection with somebody doesn't necessarily mean you're being viewed the exact same way. So if you have a seriously overbearing dominant as a submissive, you could be viewed as maybe a pushover, or somebody who doesn't stand up for themselves, or somebody who really, you know, maybe on the depressive spectrum. And whether or not that's the case is really kind of irrelevant. This is outside people looking in. Now, for dominance, you got to consider that your actions and the things that you do are going to have an effect on how people view those who are under your charge. Now, for most dominants, that means a submissive, maybe two, or your harem if you got a whole bunch.
Don't be hating.
But yeah, it really it affects how they're viewed. Now, you can say that doesn't really matter because people, you know, view them a certain way, but you have to consider that how you're viewed by somebody outside is going to change how they treat a person, how they interact or don't interact with your people. You know, whether or not they feel that your people have any autonomy to either make decisions for themselves, or whether they even need to be spoken to. And this is going to also be dependent on the person that's viewing this, right? The flip side of this spectrum is that your submissives going out and doing stupid things with or without you reflects on you as the dominant. So For me, it's a little bit broader because of the household. So, which is why we have standards. I want to make sure that when they're going out, and I don't necessarily go out with every single one of them. So they're at any given time, they may or may not be around me. So I want to make sure that they at least have a solid base of knowledge to work from when they're out doing things. So they don't break rule number 1, which is
don't do stupid shit. That's a double whip crack.
Yeah. So yeah, it's something to keep in mind, is something to understand. Now, this doesn't mean that, okay, your submissive messed up and, you messed up. Don't you understand how this makes us look, or how it makes me look? Fine, discipline and change that behavior. If you're having to get to a point where you got to punish for it, you've probably let it go a little too long. But it's something to keep in mind. It's something to kind of understand that's just how people view other people.
Yeah, and it really is no different than middle school or high school.
Yeah.
People want to say that you grow up, you mature. Yeah, but there's only so much. We're still human, and we unfortunately are going to group things together. I feel that most people that know me or that know of me from certain areas treat my submissive and my house with a very high level of respect when they meet them, just based on what they know of me. And, I'm very honored by that. That really touches me deeply. And on the flip side of that, there is one very small group of people that they don't care for me. I've had issue with them. Not to get into that, but when they meet people that are associated with this other group, they're not even spoken to, which I've very much been working toward making amends with this other group, because a community divided just is not going to stand for very long. But anyway, pretty simple to understand, I think, on that one, with what we need to do, how we need to handle ourselves, and how we affect each other. And the honor and privilege of submission is, in this case, how I'm thinking of this, because I don't want her to meet someone and be treated like crap because of something stupid, going back to rule number 1, that I did that gave somebody the wrong impression. And she will inevitably be punished for it if that was the case.
Right.
So, yeah, for me, trying to make sure that my appearance, with you and I, Master Gabriel, with you and I being friends, that means automatically, this is the second time you've been on the show. You're talked about a lot, especially with all these DomCon interviews. So people will begin.
When it turn into a drinking game, it's going to be awesome.
Right. But people will associate the two of us.
Yeah.
And
so if I'm out here being a jerk, that has a halo effect. And by extension, that means that you're a jerk.
Right. And if I'm out here doing, breaking rule number 1, and there's somebody visiting that knows you or whatever, that ends up meeting you, and obviously they see how I'm acting, and then that's going to be, well, we thought Master Gabriel was a good judge of character and only surrounded himself with good people and intelligent people, and then all of a sudden I'm doing something stupid in front of them, and it's going to reflect poorly on you. So,
and then I got to get a bigger stick.
Yeah, well, that's a 3,000 mile long stick. That's pretty. Woo, Lord. But anyway, this next one. Well, first, any last thoughts on that one?
No, I think you pretty well summed it up right there.
Cool. This was a confession of mine that I made not too long ago. I believe in a Patreon post, a Patreon blog, or it may have been on an episode. I don't recall. But being mad at your sub for your own behaviors, that one is probably one of the worst feelings that I've ever had, when I realized that it was my own fault on why I was mad at her. But what caused you to consider this one to be on the list?
Well, it wasn't you, unfortunately, but, because that would have been an entertaining topic. No, it's just part of the mix of things. And of course, with the list of things that we're looking at here, Not necessarily all of them were triggered by a particular thing, but it is something that I discuss with mentees. It is something that I discuss with people just in general. But really, taking it out of the kink sense, and this is something that could very easily happen day to day. You did something stupid at work, you got in trouble for it, so now you're mad. You cut off somebody on your way home. You come in, you yell at your husband or your wife, who then yells at the kid, who then kicks the dog. But one of the troubles with it is that it can have a ripple effect, and we'll touch on that in just a moment here. But I mean, realistically, and just think about it from a receiving end of this. If somebody yelled at you about something that they full well know that they did, but you're getting in trouble for it, and how do you feel? And even at a job, I feel like giving them the middle finger and, walking out and telling them F you. Mm-hmm. You thought there was going to be a whip crack there, didn't you? So, I mean, I don't like it. I don't like it being done to me. I'm sure as heck not going to do it to somebody else if I can at all help it. That said, it's easier to say than to do because, you get wrapped up in that emotion. You get wrapped up in it. And we look for what's called a confirmation bias. Again, the word that you'll probably know. Now, for those of you who don't know, a confirmation bias is where you find evidence to support what you already believe, whether that evidence is realistic or not. Mm-hmm. So if I believe in aliens, I'm going to cherry pick all the information that supports my belief, whether it's actually real or not. Mm-hmm. So in this case, we look for things. We look for any little thing that our submissive might have done wrong and lump them in together with what it is that we're already mad about. So it's the dark side of this is that it can very much enact a ripple effect. It can go further than just yourself. You're affecting someone else's psychological well-being at that time or mood at that time, which has the potential to affect others along the way. And it really ends up being no good for anybody. Mm-hmm. For me personally, I will tend to go towards the quiet side and kind of take some time. Luckily, I have my garden, so I go out in the garden and, kind of decompress from there. And that works most of the time as well. But, something to kind of calm myself down, knowing full well that if I interact with my slave that, I may go that direction. Yeah. So it's not necessarily something that we can always control, but you got to do your best to not kind of ripple out, take that moment. And back to, you heard about the 10-minute rule earlier. Well, here's the 10-second rule. You take 10 seconds and think about it before you make that move. Yeah. Is it really their fault, or are you actually mad at yourself?
Mm-hmm. I think with that 10-minute rule or your time in the garden, taking your time away, Lily Chaos, she's the pro producer. We talk regularly. She's become a really good friend. I've met her in person a couple of times, and she has introduced me to a wonderful, wonderful saying: when things are getting stressful and she just needs a break, she's climbing in her box.
There you go.
Like, I'm going in the box. So if you don't hear from me for a couple of days, I'm just taking some time. I've been stressed out because she's in school. She works kind of like my wife. And so she'll just need that time. And, when she's ready to interact again, and I've started doing the same thing, same words, like, you know what, I'm going in my box for a few days. I kind of need to be left alone, working through some stuff or with my job change I've recently had, where it's incredibly long hours every day in, a heat index of 100+ degrees every single day. When I get off work, I don't have time to talk to people like I used to when I was at work. And now when I get off work, I just don't feel like peopling.
Right.
So I've had to build that boundary, and it's very hard to do, especially for me, because I love that interaction. I love talking to people. You and I were supposed to talk earlier this week, and I was excited about it. And then I had forgotten that I had to help my wife with a project, which, funny enough, was on fetishes. She's taking a human sexuality class. And so she had to write a presentation, make a PowerPoint presentation out of this writing, and then actually record it and zip it and send it into school. A lot of technical stuff that she doesn't know how to do. So I was up until 2 or 3 in the morning helping her with that. But anyway, back to this being mad at the sub. I did do that. I screwed up royally, and this has happened more than a few times throughout my many days. When I was younger, I was really bad at it because I was really bad, like most young people are, at taking responsibility for my own actions. But then about the age of 23, it really hit me. There were things that happened, and it really hit me that regardless of what's going on, I have to take responsibility for my own part of it. Whether it was my actions or my decisions after the action had occurred that caused the problem for me, I'm responsible for how I react. Yeah. So I'm responsible for my actions, but I'm also responsible for my reactions. And so when I was younger, it was a huge problem. Probably, 6 months ago, Mayfair she was supposed to do something. She did it, but for one, I didn't even realize that she did it. And for two, what I told her to do was the wrong thing. It really was. I just made a bad decision, I'm human. I don't think I'm perfect, peoples. I really don't. It's in my face every day that I'm not.
Nobody believes you.
Every time I look in the mirror. But yeah, no, I was very upset with her. And about 30 minutes into a lecture, I said something that triggered a memory of me saying pretty much that exact same kind of thing when I was an immature version of me. And it hit me. It hit me hard in the feels. I mean, hard in the feels, because I've got her sitting in front of me, basically in tears and not getting a word in edgewise because I'm steady lecturing. Not that I'm a talker. God, nobody would ever say that.
Yeah. Nobody believes you there either.
Yeah. Right. So yeah, I mean, I had to, immediately just stop and take some time. And I just looked at her and I'm like, I'm sorry. And I'm going to go in here for a few minutes. I need some alone time. This is not because I'm that mad at you, even though I've just lectured you for 30 minutes. I'm that mad at myself right now. So you just chill, calm down. I'm not upset with you. Forget everything I just said. Let me go in here and crack my whip. I went into the play space. I started, practicing my whip as I do daily. And it soothes me. It calms me. And I'm cracking that thing. And then finally, I feel, okay, I'm calm. I'm not upset with myself. I'm obviously not upset with her. I'm in a place where I can talk about it. So I approach her at that point and say, look, I'm sorry. I was upset at you over something that was my own fault. Are you in a place where we can talk about this, or do you need some time? And she was able to talk about it because she's just cool like that. But yeah, no, it's something that it's an irrational behavior because we get into an irrational state of mind, I believe.
Right.
So share more of your thoughts.
Well, I mean, some of the key points that you just went over, first of all, realizing that it's happening, right?
Mm-hmm.
And kind of understanding that it is something that does happen. We all have bad days. We all have, whether it's from 100-degree weather, there are so many factors that could feed into this. I'd love to say that I am just that zen of a person that it never happens,
mm-hmm.
but that's just not the case. It can happen to the best of us in the best of situations even. So it is something that can happen. Second of all, kind of realizing it in the midst of it, like we said, the 10-second rule, kind of step away, take a few seconds. You're going in your box. And the key to that is that you had a communication, you had some kind of way to communicate that was what's going on. Because just stepping away and not saying anything, I mean, if you were the submissive in that, your first reaction is, what the heck?
Yeah.
What did I do?
Mm-hmm.
That's going to be the common reaction. So having a way to communicate not only that you're going into your box, but when you're coming out of it, so that they can identify when to kind of interact with you a little bit more. And then the third thing is being able to say that you're sorry. We often confuse the idea that as dominants that we're in charge with we are right. That's not the same word. So just because we're in charge doesn't mean we're always right. And as you just succinctly pointed out, a submissive will do the wrong thing just because they were told to do so.
Mm-hmm.
Or a slave or whomever is your S type. That doesn't mean that all of them will. Some of them push back, depending on what your dynamic is, of course. But on average, if they're told to do a thing, they're going to do a thing.
Yeah.
But your ability to apologize is a really big thing.
Yeah, it is. And that's something that a lot of people coming into this space, especially the younger people, just cannot seem to grasp that being a dominant it's not some magic genie going, poof, you're perfect. You're still human. There's still...
It's not vampire rules. You don't automatically get Kung Fu and a Maserati.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, that's so sad. But true. Sad, but true. Yeah, there's so many things. Is there anything else that you've thought of? Any other points that weren't on the list that I need to add for the show notes as far as the dark side of well, as we called it, the dark side of dominance of BDSM? Basically, it's drinking your own Kool-Aid and forgetting that we are human. Yeah, we're dominants, but we're human, and we're going to screw up, and we need to be very mindful of these particular ways that we can screw up.
Yeah, absolutely. And for those who have been paying attention to your other interviews from DomCon, I mean, some of the best dominants that I know are humble enough to understand that they're human beings, that they can mess up. They do mess up. They have a way to fix those kind of things.
Yeah, for me, that is definitely one of the most essential traits for a dominant is humility. Yeah. And that's hard for some people to wrap their head around. We have to be humble. Sure, we can have our pride about certain things, but that humility will control us and will keep us in check, because just to be blunt about it, in my opinion, it is incredibly easy, because I've seen it so many times for D-types to go too far after they lose their humility and start believing that the game is more than just a game.
Yeah.
I mean, really.
Well, it's just about like anything else you do in life. Sure, you can hop in a car and probably drive off on your first shot, but you do a lot better when you have an understanding of how a car works and what to do when you screw up.
Yeah.
You can go fishing without having any kind of training or anything like that, but you do better when you have some kind of an idea as to what you're doing and how to fix the screw ups.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like everything else. So having some kind of basics, some kind of ideas to what you're doing and where you're going with it, and a not necessarily a goal, but a pathway
mm-hmm.
of where you're going, and have some kind of caveat as to how to adjust if things get screwed up somewhere along the way.
Yeah. Well said, my friend. Well said. All right. Well, if there's no other points, I guess we can go ahead and wrap this one up.
I'm sure there probably will be about an hour from now. I'll text them all to you.
Then we'll have a part 2, because looks like from the minute counter on what we've recorded so far, this is going to be a mega episode. All right. A few thank yous. First, the bonding experience with Mistress Vega and Lady Katie. It's a YouTube channel. There's a link in the show notes. Those are a couple of local femdoms. Great ladies. Love them to death. Good friends of mine. Show producers, pro producer Lily Chaos, executive producers Arcane DGR and Violet Aurelia, Feline Rouge, Baby Love, 2269 and Faisal, senior producers Matt, Roxy Barrett, Emerald Wolf, JK, Sort Out the Kinks, Delilah, Sir Mutual Respect, Theod 123, and this very man, Master Gabriel. Producers, Kane Sin, That Place in Oklahoma City, Olive Eyes, Zine, Alexandria, and Haley. Junior producers, K2SO, Buffalo Dom 84, Jeremiah, Morgan, and Not the Daddy. If you'd like to become one of the show producers, go to our website, cauldronscrypt.com/support. The link is in the show notes to get that information. Also, bdsmcontracts.org. Use coupon code Cauldron20 for a 20% discount off of all purchases. Daycallers.com, a place for personalized handmade collars, leashes, cuffs, and belts. Whippingstraps.com, my personal maker of all things leather and paracord impact toys. With the exception of this big whammer that I got from some House Ravenblood leather or something like that. It was freaking awesome. Everybody loves that thing. All right. And finally, Torrid Timber, maker of fine fetish furniture and accessories. Next time on The Crypt, don't know what's going to happen. This episode was a complete surprise and very much a welcomed one. All my contact information is in the show notes and clickable links at that. So this has been Master Cauldron and
Master Gabriel
for CauldronScript.com. Unearth the truth.